Welcome to Your Vote Counts, candidate interviews sponsored by Capital Community TV and the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. My name is Bernadine Anderson and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that works to educate ourselves and the public about government issues and civic responsibilities. In this program, we will present the candidates for the Legislative House District 21. They are alphabetically Brian Clem and Jack L. Esp. Our format for this program is as follows. Each candidate has 3 minutes to give an opening statement outlining their background, their qualifications, and top priorities if they are elected. Following that, each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer questions that have been prepared by the League members on current issues. The candidates were not given these questions ahead of time. At the end, the candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement in which to state their legacy they would like to leave if elected to that office. Seating was not designated and question-response order will rotate. We will begin with Mr. Clem as candidate A for his opening remarks. Mr. Clem.
Great, thank you. First, let me thank the League of Women Voters for doing this interview, and I like the term interview. I think that's a good way, and I'll comment on that in a minute. And I want to thank Jack L. Esp, my colleague here, and he and I are both here for interviews, and I want to thank the League and Jack for participating. So I like interview because for me, I'm asking you to hire me for this job. You know, it's not about I'm running against Jack. It's not about something divisive or negative. I'm applying for a job and I'm here to state my qualifications. So first, I've been doing it for 12 years. So I'm the current state representative for this district and I've had this job for 12 years. So hopefully you've had a decent chance to evaluate me by now, for better or worse. And you would have some ability to know my votes, know my positions, which I think is a good way to evaluate somebody who wants this particular job. I will tell you a little bit about my experience and my ideas for the future, besides being the state representative. I'm a business owner, I'm a dad, and I grew up in Oregon, was born and raised here. I'm a 5th generation Oregonian, and I most of the time am being a dad or running my business, and then a small chunk of my time at this time of year I come to these campaign events, and then when I leave I will pick up my daughter, go to a soccer game, and go back to work on my business. Now during the session I give it all to the people and I listen to the merits of arguments about bills every day and vote yes or no and sponsor bills, and I've been doing that for a long time. So let me talk about this upcoming session because I know we got to finish really quickly. 3 things. 1, annexation. There are a lot of people who live just east of Salem who have always contacted me for 10 or 12 years about being annexed. They don't want to be, at least without a voice. I promise you, I'm the chair of the committee. That will not happen to you again this time, just like it hasn't in 10 years, because I control that policy in the Oregon legislature through the Land Use Committee. And you're not going to be annexed unless you get a chance to participate in that vote. That law already got passed 10 years ago by me, but anything that is aggressively put forward by cities to force you to live in the city when you don't want to, I will stop it. Second one is education, but I want to call it specifically, I want to talk about class sizes. So we can talk about education. We're all for education. Of course we are. No, everybody's for education. My daughter had 35 kids in her class 2 years ago. This year it's better, so that's good. But between the cost of delivering education and the funding for education, somewhere between those two, the class sizes are getting left behind. And those kids can't afford to have, they need all the attention they can get from their teachers. Let me just say it that way. Imagine trying to take 25 or 30 kids on a field trip. That's hard enough, let alone have them actually learn and master content. So class size is important, education broadly, but particularly class size is getting them down. And last is bipartisanship. I've been a committee chair for 5 sessions. I have never had a party line vote, not once ever. If I can't figure out a way to get Jack and I to agree on something, I'm just going to stay at it and keep talking and keep talking till we get to a compromise. And that's just the kind of person I am. Thank you.
And Mr. Esp, your opening remarks.
Thank you. I too would like to thank the League of Women Voters and CCTV for taking the time and effort to produce this event. I am Jack L. Esp. I am the candidate of choice for this position. Why am I the candidate of choice? I'm an everyday citizen, like most of you watching this presentation. However, I have had a background which has prepared me for this. through such things as member of 2 Republican Central Committees, a delegate to the Republican State Convention on 2 occasions. I helped to organize and was an officer in Tea Party in Eastern Oregon. And I've worked for several years with Oregon Citizens Lobby, which analyzes bills, reviews them, rates them, and then talks with various legislators on the bill itself, the merits of the bill, pro or con. And then we'll go to committees, make testimony there on how it affects the public, citizens of my district in Oregon. So this has given me an extensive amount of background in government work, along with my past employment, which is over 40 years in healthcare as Chief Financial Officer or Administrator of acute care hospitals. This has been working with many government organizations from state, federal, local, throughout that career. What is my personal background? I'm a graduate of Southern Oregon College with a degree in business administration and accounting concentration with a minor in psychology and sociology. Shortly after graduation, I accepted a position as Chief Financial Officer of Providence Hospital in Medford, Oregon. I remained there in the hospital industry for over 40 years as Chief Financial Officer and Controller and Administrator. I am the father of 2 children, both owning successful businesses, one in Washington, one here in the state of Oregon, and 1 granddaughter. What are my concerns with the state? First concern I have, the major concern, is the use of the emergency clause by the legislature, which puts a bill effective immediately upon signature by the governor and it voids the 90-day recall period, or not recall, but period to do referendums and the like. Second, I feel that all tax increases and fee increases should go before the public for a vote before they are instituted. These are 2 of the major things I'm concerned about. There are many others, but these are the ones that I am concerned about at the front of the issue.
Thank you. Thank you both. We'll begin with our questions. Mr. Esp, question 1. What do you recommend to make Oregon's infrastructure and population more resilient to seismic, flood, and wildfire disasters?
Well, each one of those requires a different approach. I'll start with wildfire. That one, the first thing that should be done is manage our forest. I think it's 80% of our forest is controlled by the federal government. They're doing a poor job, as well as the state. If we remember back a few years back, up at Sisters, there were quite a wildfire every year until they started burning out the undergrowth, which is the fuel for these fires. Once they did that, the fires there decreased radically. That's one step in forest fire management. Earthquakes, as far as controlling them, you aren't going to. They're an act of God. But the only thing that we can do as citizens is pass laws and building codes that are designed to make a building safer in the movement of an earthquake. If you remember back 30 some years ago, the big quake out by Mills City. If you notice the rigid buildings with like brick face, the bricks, they go down, where lumber moves more with the building. We need to look more at this in the high-risk areas, such as the Cascadia Fault. And the third one was floods. Floods is dams, basically is the control of floods. And they have to be controlled up and down to where they control the water.
Thank you very much. Mr. Clem.
Can you repeat the question for
Certainly.
me too? Yeah.
What do you recommend to make Oregon's infrastructure and population more resilient to seismic, flood, and wildfire disasters?
So let's start with seismic. I'll just go in the order. Seismic, we just passed a $400 million package aimed at schools. I can't. Peter Courtney and I wanted 400. I think in the end it was less. We had a fight with the speaker, and that's something I sometimes do. She's of my party and she's in my chamber, but I argue with her regularly, I notice. And Peter and I really wanted to do more for schools initially because they're kind of the vulnerable population in old buildings. And we finally got it done. At first we got an initial allocation and then a much bigger one to start retrofitting schools. Jack raised a good point about building codes. I think we've done a lot of that in building codes already. It's a lot of retrofit is the problem. So in the new builds it's easy. If they're not going to remodel though, do you make people go in and spend money on their homes and buildings? And it's a little tricky until they remodel and have to get a new permit. Then you can do it easier. But you can have incentives for earthquake bolts and that kind of thing. Floods, it's tricky because if the snow melts too early and the water goes through too quickly, you get floods, and you also have problems later when there's no water for the farmers. And so dams are one, but dams have their challenges too in fish passage. So we're looking on these, we call them low-tech water storage, which are literally creating artificial beaver dams in a lot of areas that saturate the estuary or the aquifers, and they slow down water and make water last longer. It helps with floods and it helps with drought. And last was the wildfires. And actually, Jack and I, this is what I meant about I'm on the same page. Forest management's been horrible. I worked for Weyerhaeuser, a timber company. They know how to manage their forests so they don't burn down. The federal government is horrible at it. I think it's 52% is owned, but it's still way too much. And we got to manage our forests better.
Thank you. Mr. Clem, question 2. After several years with the coordinated care model for the Oregon Health Plan, what is your opinion of its implementation? And would you propose any statewide changes?
I like it. I'll just say that right off the bat. I think it's been very good. The one here locally, particularly, very good. I think they've done a really good job of, redundant testing, for example. I go to Salem Health, I go to my own doctor, and I might end up with the same test previously 2 or 3 times because they didn't talk, and they all made money testing me, let's face it, and that's not why they do it, but they just didn't coordinate. Now they all know. I do one here literally the next morning. I broke my ankle 2 years ago. They already had it at all my other people. It was all electronically spread, and that's not because I'm in a CCO. I'm not. But it's because it forced everybody to stop doing everything individually at every single place and say, for this population, let's figure out how to coordinate it so we're not wasting money. I was able to sponsor a bill with Governor Kitzhaber, asked me to do it personally. It said, we'll pay $10,000 to treat you when it's really hot and you go for a heat stroke related type symptom at the emergency room. We won't pay $150 for an air conditioner for you. Why? So CCOs buy air conditioners for people. That was my bill. So I like them. There's probably some tweaks. We debate this every time. Should they be for-profit only? Should they be non-profit only? I don't think so. I think LLCs can do it. Ours is an LLC. It's fine. We debate about whether they should have their boards be public or their boards should be private. Should they be open meeting? I kind of like them right where they're at. They have brought down uninsured rates tremendously. They have made things more effective, people healthier. I'm sure there's always a way to do better, but the people who run ours locally are fantastic, and I support them 100%.
Thank you. And Mr. Esp.
Would you repeat the question?
Certainly. After several years with the coordinated care model for Oregon Health Plan, what's your opinion of its implementation, and are there any changes statewide that you would recommend?
I'll go out on a limb on this one. As I mentioned earlier, I spent 40 plus years in healthcare management as finance officer and administrator, most of it in finance. I started in the business a year after Medicare became effective, so I lived clear through that until 2005. My observation is that CCOs, HMOs, Medicare, the whole ballgame has done nothing but contributed to the extreme high cost and rapid increase in our health care. I did a study after retirement in 2005 here with the State Health Authority there were 58 hospitals in Oregon at the time. I got the audited financial statements of 57 of them and did a study. And what I found was astounding. Everybody says hospitals are rip-offs making too much money. The average for those 57 hospitals was 1.7% bottom line. As Brian will confirm, you can't run a business on 1.7. I love her. I believe strongly that the healthcare system should go back into the private hands. If everybody, CCOs, HMOs, whatever, Medicare, Medicaid, paid public billing, those hospitals could have cut their rates in half instantly if everybody paid fair share. But since Medicare came in and got the discounts, then the large insurance companies felt the same thing. They should get them. And that has caused us to write off so much in our medical field that the costs have gone sky high to those that don't fit.
Thank you. Question 3 to you, Mr. Esp. Do you think the balance between individual and corporate taxes is appropriate? And would you please relate this to your idea of what the ideal version of Oregon State tax structure would look like?
Ideal? Ideally, a properly administered, I'm going to get in trouble here, deep trouble, but I say what I feel. A properly administered sales tax, replacing many of our other taxes, not an additional tax, but replacing, decreasing property tax, especially for seniors and disabled people. It's limiting them badly. We're missing a lot of revenue that all of the states around us are collecting when we go out of state. We're missing it when they come into our state. Now, I'm not saying we can't have a minimal income tax, but we don't need new taxes every session, new fees, new additions, such as the privilege tax that came in recently. Privilege, is it called a tax or a fee? I'm not sure which. Where for, I believe it's any car over $20,000, there's a $400 privilege fee applied to it. This is not the proper way to tax our citizens and run our business. The state should get something. Our revenue has been the highest, if I'm not correcting, for the last couple of years it's ever been in history. And yet we're continually passing more taxes, more fees. Let's look at expenses.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clem.
Thank you. I like Jack. He says what he means. And I tend to agree with him. We should look at a consumption tax too. You got to lower other things. You got to lock it in so people trust that you're not going to raise it. But I think we should look at that too. But to your specific question, corporate versus individual, I've got 7 companies. All of them are taxed at the individual rates and levels, which is higher. So it's not, all business owners don't automatically look for the lowest tax rate. It's for a lot of different reasons. Control, I'm never going to take it public, a lot of reasons. All of them are taxed at the higher rate, and I choose to do that voluntarily. I do think business could afford to invest more if they get value. So what I do is I work with the actual businesses that I do business with and with the business organizations like AOI and OBI and those groups. And I say, look, what do you need? And they say, we need better workers. We need more qualified workers, people who aren't on drugs. We need people who know right out of school how to help us. We can grow the economy. But the key is they want value, not just to spend more. They actually want to get something so they don't have to do as much retraining. So I'm on a group called the Joint Committee on Student Success. There's 13 of us, both parties, both chambers, going all around the state. We're talking about the education system, but we're also going to then talk about, as Jack said, the cost of government, the cost side, retirement, all these kinds of different things, and the revenue side. And I'm confident we can come up with, as Oregonians, not Republicans and Democrats, as Oregonians, a deal that looks at our revenue system, should look at a consumption too, and get those tourists for some too. But you got to make it fair for the Oregonians too, and the low income and the seniors. So I think we can do it. I think it's possible. I think we can do it together.
Thank you. Mr. Clem, our next question. What steps will you take to ensure more Oregonians are qualified and hired for our Oregon jobs?
Well, you've hit on one of my favorite topics. I've been pushing this idea called Buy Oregon for the last, my staff's here, 12 years. I've got it passed a couple times. It actually gives incentives in purchasing by state government for doing business with Oregon companies. And so we spend a lot of money on things. I'll give you one example that's just a good example. Farmers and food and schools. But this could apply to paper and the local stationery too. Cooks. I was sitting on my tractor on our farm looking at a school and realizing they don't even buy from Oregon farmers. I didn't care if they bought from my farm, but they didn't buy from Oregon farmers, and that's our tax money going there. I changed that law in 2007 and again, or 8, and again in 2010. We are now the leading state in the union at procuring food for school lunch from Oregon farmers. It's called the Oregon Farm to School program. And that was like one of my first ideas on a tractor, thinking about if I got elected, what would I do? I think we should use the state government's purchasing power to hire more Oregonians. Private sector people, they can make the decisions they want to about who they hire and contract with. I'm not going to try to tell somebody they can't order off of Amazon. That's not the government's job. But if you can think about buying local, I'd appreciate it. And I do want the government to buy local. And I've worked many times to pass bills to do that.
Thank you. And Mr. Esp.
Repeat, please.
Certainly. What steps will you take to ensure more Oregonians are qualified and hired for Oregon jobs?
This is an extenuation of our education system. All students do not need to go to college when they graduate from high school. In high school, we can have more trade education. Shop, when I was in school, was one of them. But then what the government can do, besides changing that in the school system, is create more technical schools to train people in specific things. Go to Chemeketa Community College down here. They have programs like in welding to produce welders. That's what the businesses are looking for, is qualified individuals out of school that they can hire to fill these positions. By doing that, we have the young people working, not out on the streets, not killing time. So I very definitely feel that trade schools are a significant part of correcting this problem. Now, like Brian said, our government dollars, state dollars, should be spent on state products when possible. Food program, good. We grow a lot of food here. We produce a lot of lumber here. Why are we shipping those trees over to Japan when over here in LeGrand they have to ship trees in there from Mount Hood and Washington to run their mills? You know, that's ludicrous, and that doesn't create jobs in Oregon. Those are things that the government should be looking at how we can solve.
Thank you. Our question 5 goes to Mr. Esp to start. Do you have concerns regarding public education? And is there more that the state can do to address those concerns?
I have severe concerns regarding public education, as Brian has already said once. I've been talking to some people, previous school teachers, school employees, the public, and school is one of the 2 main concerns they have in our state, the other being homeless. Now, schools, as I understand it, and I have not had time since discovering this to go study the situation fully, and I won't have time until after the election. But it's my understanding that our spending per student is about average of the states. Yet, according to the article in the Statesman Journal last week, we're about 8% below the national average in graduation rate. What's causing this? Why, if we're spending the same and we're getting less results, where's the problem? Now, what I'm getting the feeling from the public, etc., is that it is too much money going to management. Now, that's the study I would think I would need to do after the election, when I get elected. I know in the insurance industry, about 12% goes to management. 88% goes to claims. What is our ratio in school? I don't know. But I have a feeling that with the money we have, we aren't getting enough money into the classroom, and too much is going up above. Because of that, we can't pay what we should pay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Clem.
Thank you. As I mentioned, it's one of my top priorities. Part of it comes from, my mom was a school teacher. I believe the greatest achievement of our democracy in this country is public education. And part of it, I have a daughter who's in the same public school. She's 10, but it wouldn't matter if I didn't. And I could afford to send my daughter to a private school, probably. I will never, ever do that under any circumstance, because I believe she needs to experience, like every person born here, what it's like to be in the real world. And that means she needs to walk down to McKinley, she needs to go to Leslie, and she needs to go to South. And I'm nervous about the state of our education system. I don't think it's, a disaster. I think the people who work there do their absolute best with the resources given. But between the cost structure, between administrator pay, between the revenue side of the equation, we have changed a lot from individual corporate no sales tax since 1990 when Measure 5 passed. We've changed a lot. And a lot of things have changed in the classroom from that time. And this process I've described, called the Joint Committee on Student Success, with 13 of us going around the state, is going to try and fix it after like 27 years on the cost side, on the revenue side, and on the things like CTE. I mean, I went out to Baker City on one of these things. It's incredible what they're doing there. But they created a nonprofit. They're working with business to bring those businesses in with sponsorships and knowledge. It doesn't cost as much that way. And so we have people doing great things all around the state, but we've got to make best practices. And we have to actually, as a legislature, bring some accountability. If we're going to give you this much money, we do have some strings about accountability, and it can't all be administrator pay. It can't all go to this or that. We want to see these outcomes, but that's what we're going to do in the next 9 months.
Thank you. We will begin our closing remarks now, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Clem.
Thank you. Well, as I said in the beginning, this is a job interview. I'd like to keep the job that I've got. I will respect your vote either way, of course, but I think what I really would rather touch on, whether I'm running for this job or not, is something that I hope we're demonstrating today. Jack and I aren't enemies, but too many people in politics on literally both sides of the aisle talk like we're all enemies and the system is all rigged to destroy you. No way. I'm an Oregonian. I don't care about my party at all from a principled, a stand. Sure, I'm glad Democrats stand for these things. But I represent a lot of voters who are no party because they are so sick of partisanship. They're so sick of if somebody says, Barack Obama thought of it, I hate it, and the same idea could come from Donald Trump and now they love it, or vice versa. That's not how I operate. Jack and I could sit here and come to policies and conclusions that would work. I guarantee it. On timber, on all these things, I know we could. And so if you're looking for people who aren't going to participate in this ripping each other apart, and they want their legacy to be a statesperson. I'm a man, so statesman. That's who I am. I was born here, so was my dad, so was my grandfather. I'm interested in making Oregon a place where government actually works. We don't hate each other. We figure out the problems in a bipartisan manner or no party manner, and we get our kids educated. We have a good economy. People aren't insecure in their homes. They have food. That's what I want. It's not a crazy platform, but right now it sounds crazy because everybody is tearing each other apart, and I don't want any part of that.
Thank you. And Mr. Esp, your closing remarks.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the public for this opportunity to listen to both what Brian and I have to say and how we feel about things, because it's going to be up to you to make the final decision of which one of us goes over to the Capitol next summer. I request that you consider what you've heard here today from each of us and cast your vote based on that and other education you get throughout this campaign to vote by November 6th to where your vote counts. And I don't care who you are, your vote counts. My vote doesn't count by itself, but our vote counts as a group. And we may grow three of us 2-1, but it still counts. I'm looking forward to serving the public, same as Brian is, for the next 2 years. Yeah, I'm a newbie. I'm coming in here, but I have the experience working with government, not experience as a legislature. We've been each asked to state what our legacy would be. I personally am not looking at creating a legacy for this position. The only thing I want to be remembered for is that I voted for based on the principles I have published throughout this campaign, some of which are the right to life. I can't see it. Every individual conceived has the right to be born and lead a productive life. Fiscal responsibility, our government should only be involved in those functions of society that the public sector can't produce. Fiscal responsibility, our government should work within a controlled budget with the money it has to spend without creating new sources. Second Amendment rights, I think everybody has the right to own a gun and protect themselves. Controlled immigration, our borders should be protected in order to protect our society, our citizens, and our jobs.
Thank you both very much. extend our thanks to our candidates and to Capital Community TV. This is all the time we have. You've been watching Your Vote Counts, a candidate interview for Legislative House District 21 with Mr. Brian Clem and Mr. Jack L. Esp. We hope you will watch our other candidate forums, and please see the CCT website for time and dates. These interviews are a public service to voters to become more acquainted with our candidates who hope to lead our city, county, and state in the coming years. The last day to register to vote or make changes to your registration is October 16th. Ballots will be mailed about October 17th and should be returned by November 6th at 8 p.m. Please remember, your postmarks do not count. We urge you, as our candidates have done, to make democracy work and be a voter. This is Bernadine Anderson for the League of Women Voters and CCTV, thanking you for watching Your Vote Counts.